My racist coworker is mad that I speak multiple languages and tried to report me to the manager after I got with her crush, but she failed and instead ended up getting fired. Plus update. I recently started working at a cafe to support myself through university, and almost everything is fine, but it's very obvious that my coworker Melanie doesn't like me. Her biggest issue with me is that I speak multiple languages and she hates when I interact with customers in their native language. Always saying something like, "Just speak English, they'll understand you," or "Why are you being so extra?" Even though I know it makes them comfortable when I speak to them in their native language. I come from Central Europe and in my home country it is mandatory to learn multiple languages in school. I know English, Spanish, German, and Dutch, though my accent is very obvious when I speak. The town the cafe is in gets a lot of tourists, so I always switch to the language the customer is speaking in if I know it. This has never been a problem until Melanie heard me speaking in a different language and accused me of being spoiled and a privileged little white girl. She told me average people don't speak nor get to learn so many languages and that my daddy's money paid for it. I told her that my family is actually really poor and I never even met my father, but either way she didn't have a right to speak to me that way. She always tried to pick a fight with me over this, and when I asked a coworker of ours why she reacted that way, they admitted that they suspect she's racist since she said she felt cheated that I hadn't told her I'm Polish. Every chance Melanie gets, she tells me that it's disgusting how I am refusing to see my privilege and how I shouldn't be learning how to speak with local accents because it's verging on appropriation. I only ever saw her at work because I would never willingly hang out with her after everything she said to me, but one night I was invited to go out with my coworkers and I didn't realize that Melanie had also been invited. I tried my best to avoid her and just stuck next to Mark, one of my coworkers that I have a crush on. We were basically with each other all night and barely interacted with the rest of the group. Mark also speaks Spanish and I caught myself throwing in random Spanish words in our conversation. We laughed about how I sounded like a TV character who would say "ay caramba" out of nowhere, and I felt like we were really bonding over this simple thing. Dare I say, he liked me back. It wasn't until days later that I found out Melanie also had a crush on Mark, which would explain her actions throughout the night. We started playing games at some point and Melanie asked me about the languages I spoke. She pretended to be impressed when I told her and pulled out Google Translate of all things to ask me questions in the languages I mentioned. I answered every single one, and when she switched to Spanish, I saw a light bulb flicker in her head. I didn't know what that was about at the time, but it turns out she thought I was showing off by speaking Spanish to Mark and wanted to embarrass me. When I answered in Spanish, she stopped me mid-sentence and told me she couldn't believe how bad my pronunciation was. She laughed at me and tried to get others to join in, but it was just very awkward. She told me that after hearing my English, she thought my Spanish would be better. Mark and I just looked at each other very confused. I said my pronunciation wasn't wrong, I just learned Spanish by watching Argentinian soap operas and that's why my accent sounds the way it does. She told me to stop lying and to just admit that it wasn't good, but Mark chimed in and told her that I did in fact speak with said accent and it's not wrong, my Spanish was excellent. Melanie told him that he didn't have to pretend to not hurt my feelings and that I had to accept that I'm not good at everything. I was baffled. I burst out laughing and I could tell she was pissed. I said she shouldn't speak about things she knows nothing about and that she was being an a-hole. I went home after that and Mark actually walked me home. He kept my mind off the entire situation and just talked about random things. Talking to him felt so natural that I asked if he wanted to talk more in my apartment. One thing led to another and I can say for sure that he does like me back. The next day, Melanie came over to my house to apologize for her behavior, though it was hardly an apology. Update: there's a coworker at the cafe I work at named Melanie who's been incredibly racist to me just because I speak multiple languages, and on our recent outing with our other coworkers, she tried to make fun of me for my accent. Her plan didn't work and she was removed from several group chats the next day. Many of the people at our outing told me that they didn't like Melanie because she acts very entitled. Even though all of us are working to support ourselves, she's working to spend a little extra money on herself. Because of that, she thinks she's better than us, but when she realized that I was multilingual, she thought daddy's money paid for it and basically saw me as competition. She decided to target me whenever she could because of that and because she was jealous that I was spending a lot of time with her crush. When people took my side, Melanie came over to my apartment to apologize. She said that she shouldn't have tested me, but it's not her fault that I spoke too fast and with unusual pronunciation, so I couldn't blame her for thinking I didn't speak the language well. I couldn't believe that's what she considered an apology, so I just stood there baffled out of my mind. I could tell it annoyed her thought, but she continued to speak. She apologized again and asked if I could tell the others how sorry she was. I told her I'd see what I could do, but I doubt they'll forgive her. I guess this gave her the push to be bold, so she asked if I could tell Mark how embarrassed and sorry she was. I actually laughed out loud. I knew Mark heard everything she said because he stayed the night after our outing with our coworkers. I kicked her out and told her that her apology meant nothing and she was still an a-hole. Mark actually spoke to me in Spanish as I was closing the door, and I know she heard it. He told me that he wasn't going to forgive her. He also told me that since all of this started at work, I should tell our manager about her behavior because she's creating a very toxic work environment and she's difficult to work with. I took his advice the very next day and explained everything to our manager. She was very kind and actually witnessed some of Melanie's behavior firsthand, but never said anything since I never outright complained. I didn't hear anything about it until a week or so later when my manager came to tell me Melanie had complained about me. She tried to flip the script to make me look like the bad guy, saying that I was bullying her, laughed at her, and made everyone hate her. When Melanie heard my manager speaking in Spanish, she quickly accused her of discriminating against her. Melanie claimed that we were all ganging up on her because she doesn't speak Spanish and were bullying her for it. She jumped her butt off to that conclusion. Safe to say she was fired on the spot.